Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. God save the United States and this honorable court.
Hi, I'm Hans von Spakovsky at Advancing American Freedom, and this is Court is Adjourned. And the title of our episode today is What Conservatives Believe, Rediscovering the Conservative Conscience, which is actually the name of this new book by former Vice President Mike Pence that is just out in June, published by Center Street. And it talks about all the issues we face today, a time when our culture, our history, our religious freedom, and our very safety and livelihoods are being questioned, attacked, and threatened by radical progressives who unfortunately have invaded our schools, our institutions, our government, and even corporate America. So we're here to talk to the author, Michael Richard Pence, 48th Vice President of the United States, who's had quite a political career. He was the 50th governor of Indiana, where he pushed through the largest tax cut in the state's history, among other achievements. For that, he spent 10 years in the U.S. House of Representatives. And like me, he is a lawyer by training, having received his J.D. from the McKinney School of Law at Indiana University. Mr. Vice President, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Hans. And belated welcome to Advancing American Freedom Foundation.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thrilled to have you and the entire team with us here.
Appreciate it. So, actually, the most basic question I always like to ask authors is, why did you write this book?
Well, I'd love to start there. I wrote What Conservatives Believe because I joined the Republican Party during the years of Ronald Reagan.
Right, that's when you first got into the House, right?
It's when I first ran for the House.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get in.
Right.
But I was drawn to the Republican Party, not because of the eloquence or the winsome personality of the 40th president, but it's because of his commitment to a strong national defense, to limited government, the rule of law, the right to life, traditional values. And that was the agenda that's really defined the Republican Party over the last 50 years. But to your point in the opening remarks, we've had some changes in the political landscape on the left and on the right that I thought merited me putting pencil to paper. And the first change is that our contest over the last 50 years has been with a very traditional liberal Democrat party, big government party that embraces liberal social issues. That's changed because the Democratic Party, as you observed, maybe better than very few in our movement, it has been overtaken by the radical left, a progressive left that embraces socialism, radical gender ideology, abortion on demand up to the moment of birth, and that's a different political opponent for us. But what I wanted people also to know is there's another threat to the conservative movement coming from what I call the populist right. That would question America's role as leader of the free world, would embrace big government solutions, price controls, nationalization, would set aside our historic commitment to limited government under the Constitution, and marginalizing the right to life, relegating it to only a state issue. Now, I think are all echoes of voices on the populist right that have gained some traction in the new Trump administration, not all. I thought it was a good time to write and remember what conservatives believe.
Well, in fact, talking about really the start of the conservative movement, I mean, you actually start the book with a great story about Barry Goldwater and the Barry Goldwater campaign, which, I mean, a lot of, I think, folks consider he was really the first presidential candidate to oppose the kind of progressive propaganda, progressive policies that were being pushed ever since the beginning of the 1900s.
He did, and This might be particularly amusing to you, being probably the foremost election law expert in the country, but I love what George Will said about Barry Goldwater. He said Barry Goldwater actually won the election in 1964. It just took 16 years to count the votes. It's not literally true, but Barry Goldwater's ideas that he put in that short booklet that I've got a first edition copy of at home.
The Conscience of a Conservative.
The Conscience of a Conservative. It inspired my book, with the subtitle of which is Rediscovering the Conservative Conscience.
Right.
The ideas he articulated there were not original to him, let's be fair. It was the likes of Russell Kirk, going all the way back to, Adam Smith and The Wealth of Nations, what conservatives have long believed he put on a page. But then it would be 16 years later that those came to the White House and really became the dominant philosophy of government for the Republican Party. And let me be really clear. I think the new Trump administration has gotten a lot right, Hans. I mean, I think extending the Trump-Pence tax cuts, taking the fight directly to Iran, standing with Israel, appointing those conservative judges to our courts to this day.
Thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness for that, and which has been a bulwark for freedom now and during our years. But also securing the southern border from the worst border crisis in American history. I give the president all the credit in the world for those strong conservative stands. But where there have been departures, I thought a book like this might start a conversation about whether that's now what the Republican Party is about, or whether we're going to return to the principles of limited government and values that have defined our movement.
Now, you have a whole chapter on defending religious liberty, free speech, and the Second Amendment. Those all used to be such basic values, I think, that we all believed in. What has led to this widespread attack we see on this now, particularly from those used to be called liberal values, and now it's unfortunately a lot of liberal groups that are leading the attacks on those.
The antipathy that the progressive left shows for the First Amendment, for the Second Amendment, is real. It's visceral. In fact, as you've commented on publicly, the Democrats have already announced through their would-be Speaker, Jeffries, that if they take the House of Representatives, they intend to add seats to the Supreme Court of the United States so that they can undermine essentially the constitutional order that this majority has so consistently upheld. But that is our contest. I tell people sometimes Joe Biden won the nomination for his party in 2020, but Bernie Sanders won the party. I mean, this is not, as the old saying goes, this is not your father and mother's old Democrat Party these days. It is a progressive left that embraces radical policies that are often hostile directly to religious freedom, the right to live, to work, to worship according to the dictates of your conscience, to the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, and ultimately on the sanctity of life. This Democratic Party, from the days of Bill Clinton, went from a party that said abortion should be safe and legal and rare to being a pro-abortion party of the highest order.
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange. It's almost like a religious ideology to them.
Well, I think there is some truth to that. The thinking among the progressive left really sees government as the solution to all things. And in the classic style of progressives, it sees government as a means of remaking the society and what they believe is a more fair construct, where the conservative believes in limited government, believes in personal freedom and liberties and economic freedom. And I have to tell you, I've been really heartened at the response we've gotten to the book, Hans, as I've traveled across the country how many people have come up, even folks that embrace every aspect of the new Trump administration,
Right.
have come up and said to me, "This is the debate we need to have," and I'm grateful you wrote the book.
I have to tell you, as I was reading through all the different chapters in there, particularly
Thank you.
where you talk about limited government, the theme that to me that seems to be running all through that is that the right that Americans cherish the most is the right to be left alone by the government.
What did Ronald Reagan say years ago? He said that the most frightening words in the American language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you."
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we don't need your help. We need freedom. We need government to stay within those constitutional limits, and that it explains the extraordinary success of the American experiment. The ideals in the Declaration, but then the framework of the Republic, which you defend like few other Americans do. That I really do believe it's now fallen to the Republican Party to be a vanguard for those principles of the Republic, and I hope this book starts a very fulsome debate. And as you know, that's what we're all about at Advancing American Freedom Foundation.
Right.
It's these same principles that inspired me and a handful of other conservatives who'd worked at my side to create this organization 5 years ago. To have scholars of your stature come and join us earlier this year was a great honor for us. But I hope any of your viewers or listeners who cherish the principles of limited government, a strong America on the world stage, the right to life, know that with you here, with our team here, Advancing American Freedom's going to continue to champion those principles.
I think we will. I've had a lot of, you're talking about returning to the kind of conservative principles that have made this country great, many of which are under attack. I've had a lot of people say to me that they believe there is now such a divergence on many of these issues: religious liberty, the Second Amendment, free speech, immigration, abortion, that they feel like we're in a cold civil war in this country. And I wonder what you think about that, and whether, is there a way of bridging this divide, or are the opinions so divided on this that it's just going to be a matter of one side or the other finally winning out?
Well, we'll settle a lot of these things in the political debate. But, I end the book with a quote that Barry Goldwater started his book with,
Right.
which is that America is essentially a conservative country. And that's why I really believe for the midterm elections for 2028, Republicans would do well to return to articulating and running on these principles again.
Right.
Because I think the majority of Americans still believe in the principles in our Constitution. They still believe in the liberties enshrined in the Bill of Rights. They still believe government ought to live within its means, that America's leader of the free world. So that being said, I think these ideas win. But I want to say one other thing. I think our politics are more divided than at any time in my lifetime, Hans.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced the American people are as divided as our politics. And if we'll start talking about these ideals and principles again, in a way that can be heard over the din of American political debate today, I think you'll see Americans rally to our cause. We always do better as conservatives when we're articulating our principles, our values, and have a positive agenda for the American people. It's one of my complaints about the populist right. It seems largely defined by grievance, and instead of solutions. And it pushes forward policies that often are at odds with the conservative movement, saying that the ends justify the means, saying that people like you and me, who still cherish those conservative principles, in their terms, don't know what time it is. When in fact, I think it's exactly those principles that can bridge a lot of our political divide today. And remember, Ronald Reagan won 49 states.
Yeah, no, I
in
know.
1984.
Right, it was quite something. Well, no,
And America hasn't changed that much in those days.
On this issue of you have this great phrase. I just love this that you came up with. You talk about the siren song of populism unmoored to conservative principles. I mean, that's what you were just talking about. That's a great way of putting that.
Well, thank you. I'm humbled by that coming from you. To me, there's nothing wrong with the sentiment of populism. And we always ought to, in a government that is founded on we the people,
right.
We always ought to be sensitive to popular opinion. But when it's not moored to conservative principle, it can go anywhere. I mean, a great example of that is the new Trump administration has embraced policies of nationalizing American businesses, having the government take a stake in private enterprise.
And the government runs everything else. It runs itself so well. That's a good idea.
Well,
right?
that's it. Somebody, right? Somebody asked me the other day. I guess Bernie Sanders said that the federal government ought to take 50% stake in AI. Now, I think we got challenges with AI. We ought to address them. But I said, good heavens, the people that can't run the post office should not
right.
be given a 50% right. stake in the most important new technology in 100 years. But I do think that this business of nationalization, I remember when the Trump administration came out with their first instance, which I think was U.S. Steel being bought by Nippon, and they took shares in that for the federal government. Elizabeth Warren, I quoted in my book, Elizabeth Warren said, quote, Donald Trump has come across an idea that I came up with years ago, close quote. And I added very quickly in the book that actually, with all due respect to Senator Elizabeth Warren, she didn't come up with the idea of a government nationalizing private enterprise. That was Karl Marx.
Right.
So, but that's what I mean by a populism unmoored to conservative principle, and I appreciate the affirmation.
You also talk about the problems of law and order and kind of the breakdown in the justice system, the defunding of police, et cetera. Is that an issue also coming from the far left that we can solve? I mean, how do you apply conservative principles to that?
Well, look, conservatives believe in law and order, as I say, from the neighborhood to the border.
And those are intertwined, right?
They are completely intertwined.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And I would submit to you that more than a majority, the overwhelming majority of the American people hold to that same view. Support law enforcement, understand the need
right.
for law enforcement to have the tools to protect our families and our streets. And that crosses all lines of race and creed and color. And I think the progressive left's ongoing assault on law enforcement, funding, on defunding the police, has been deeply problematic. And I think it still represents a great challenge for us that we have to push back on. I will say some on the populist right have bought into some aspects of that, being willing to set aside our commitment to law and order where there's a specific objective involved. I think we do well when we make it clear that we are the party that believes in law and order and impartial justice. That's what Republicans and that's what conservatives are about.
Talk about federalism here. You know, that's also something you talk about, and you had the experience on both sides. First as governor of Indiana, then as the vice president in the federal government. And what we've seen in the past few years, it seems like, is the states seem to, for a long time, just kind of go along with what the federal government was telling it to do, and now we seem to have a new assertion of federalism by the states. Has it gone, on the one hand, that's a good thing. On the other hand, it seems like some states may be going too far.
Well, I think Again, a great Ronald Reagan observation, his first inaugural address. He said it's important to remember that the states created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states. And the Constitution, which you know and speak about with more authority than very few others in the country, the Constitution is a document of a limited federal government, but by definition, then unlimited state authority. I taught a class. I know you've taught at George Mason University. I taught a class last year on the Constitution, and I said to the kids when we got to the 10th Amendment, I said the 10th Amendment is actually not a new thought in the Constitution. It's the ICYMI of federalism. It's in case you missed it.
Right.
The power is not specifically delegated to the federal government or reserved to the states and the people. And so I think for conservatives, when we think about education reform, when we think about election integrity, when we think about welfare reform, all of that falls to the states, and making sure that we stand for the principle that we want states to be those laboratories of innovation, to improve public confidence in all of government services. Because I can tell you, I was a congressman for a lot of years. I served as president of the Senate when I was vice president, and I served as vice president. But being governor is a different ballgame. Being a state representative is a different ballgame. Thomas Jefferson had it right. The government that governs least governs best. The closer you are to the people, the more accountable you are.
Right.
When these issues like education make their way up to the federal level, no real surprise that they end up becoming these vast, bloated bureaucracies that deliver worse and worse results. So I do think a part of what conservatives believe, part of what we've championed here at Advancing American Freedom, and I'm happy to say a major part of the first and now second Trump administration has been the de-evolution of power out of Washington, D.C., shutting down the Federal Department of Education, deregulating energy, making it possible for states to innovate and reform. I say on the populist right, there are those that would like to see more concentration of power and power taken away from the states in certain areas. But I think in the overwhelming majority of cases, that's another one the Trump administration's gotten right, and we ought to be championing.
You know, there's some people I talk to who are pessimistic. I was happy to see that at the end of the book you're optimistic. I read there's this great quote from you about how you talk about how conservatism will, quote, revive the spirit of the Declaration of Independence, restore the constitutional order that has served our nation since 1776, and ensure the American people will flourish for another 250 years. I have to say, I sure hope that's true.
I believe it with all my heart. Look, since my involuntary retirement 5 years ago, I've traveled a lot. We have this great foundation, Advancing American Freedom, here in Washington. I live in Indiana. I've traveled around the country, spoken at schools and groups large and small. And I'm absolutely convinced that the majority of the American people still cherish the ideals of the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
Still understand we're the greatest nation on earth, not because of who we are, but because of what we believe, and the form of government that we stood by. And at great cost, our patriot heroes have worn the uniform and defended in generation after generation. And I just think it's incumbent on us to hold the banner of these principles high. That's the calling of my life. I know it's the calling of your life, Hans. It's our calling at Advancing American Freedom, because I really believe when we hold that banner high, people will rally to our cause, because this is a freedom-loving nation.
Right.
But I'm not saying this just because I think it'd be good for the Republican Party. I'm saying this because I believe these are all the principles that have always made America strong and prosperous and free. And in whatever time I have in this life, I intend to be a voice for those values, just like you.
Well, I can tell you those were all the things that my father, who was a Russian immigrant, admired about the United States. Well, thank you so much for being here. Now, I got to, you know, my publisher told me on one of my prior books, you're supposed to mention your book at least 3 times in any interview.
How'd I do?
You did okay.
Okay.
So it's Mike Pence, What Conservatives Believe, Rediscovering the Conservative Conscience, out now at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, etc. Now, as you know, Mr. Vice President, I usually do a classical movie review. I don't have one for this, but you know, you had a great story about Barry Goldwater at the beginning of your book, and you quote him at the end, and I discovered that in 1964, Barry Goldwater did something that apparently no presidential campaign had done. They produced a half-hour campaign film. It's called Choice. You can find it on YouTube, and it has a great discussion of the problems facing America. And what I found most fascinating about it was that if it wasn't in black and white, and you simply updated some of the fashions people were wearing, you would see some of the same problems today that they were facing back then. And there is a great bonus at the end of the movie. There's an appearance by John Wayne.
I love it. I'm headed to YouTube.
So this has been Court Adjourned. I'm Hans von Spakovsky, and follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You've got the strongest hand in the world. That's right, your hand. The hand that marks the ballot. The hand that pulls the voting lever. Use it, will you? Use it.